The night they buried the wrong body. I moved into the old mining town because rent was cheap and the people were quiet. But on my first night I learned the quiet wasn't peace, was fear preserved like an old wound. At 1:13 a.m., the church bell rang even though the church had been abandoned for decades. Its bell rusted to the point it shouldn't have been able to move. I looked through my window and saw townsfolk walking toward the graveyard in a slow, trance-like procession, each holding a candle, each face blank and drained of color. They didn't speak. They didn't look around. They just drifted down the street as if pulled by a string tied through their ribs. I followed at a distance, drawn by something I couldn't name. The cold air, thick with the smell of wet soil, and something faintly metallic beneath it. At the graveyard gate, the crowd stopped in perfect unison, all turning their heads toward a single grave newly dug. Freshly turned soil glistening like it had just been watered. A man in a black suit stepped forward, carrying a wooden box no bigger than a child's coffin, his movements stiff and mechanical like a puppet operated by unseen hands. The coma shook violently in his grasp. Someone inside was alive. The crowd did nothing. They didn't flinch. They didn't react. Their eyes were wide and glassy, like they weren't seeing any of it tore, like they were seeing too much. The man in the suit knelt and whispered something to the box. I couldn't hear the words, but the tone made my stomach twist, reassuring, coaxing, almost soothing. Then the box screamed. Not a person screaming, but something raw and inhuman, a wet, gargled shriek that sounded like a throat built incorrectly, like vocal cords grown in the wrong order. The man calmly opened the lid. Inside was not a child. It was a face, just a face, skin stretched over bone, eyes sewn open, mouth unstitched and trembling, breathing without lungs beneath it. The crowd bowed their heads as if paying respect. The face looked at me, its eyes stitched, wide focused on me with desperate, pleading horror, as if begging me to free it from a torment it couldn't name. The man in the suit lifted the face out with gloved hands, the skin dangling like a mask torn from something larger, its jaw quivering in silent terror. He laid it gently at the edge of the open grave. "Nate, we correct the mistake." A murmur rippled through the people, not speech, but a low droning sound like wind forcing itself through rotted wood. The man in the suit gestured for them to come closer. Every person reached into their coat or pocket and pulled out a scrap of skin, some small as a coin, some large as a handprint, each piece marked with a name written in black, tar-like ink. Placed the scraps gently around the face, forming a mosaic, each piece twitching like it was trying to crawl away. The man nodded with solemn satisfaction. "It's time," he said. "We bury the right one." The earth beneath the grave shifted. Something enormous moved under the soil, something that pushed upward, cracking the ground like a hand pressing against a coffin lid. His face screamed again, the scraps around it vibrating violently, trying to join, trying to escape, trying to become whole. The man placed his hand on the face and whispered, "Not yet." The earth split open as a bloated arm thrust upward, skin blackened. Nails split, flesh pulsing like it was filled with maggots. The crowd stepped back but didn't run. They were waiting, expecting this, resigned. The man in the suit pulled a rusted nail from his pocket long as my index finger, old enough to have been forged before the town existed. He held it over the face. The face sobbed. I stepped forward, unable to watch another second of this ritual. The moment my foot crossed the boundary of the graveyard, every head snapped toward me at once, hundreds of eyes. Empty but aware, staring through me like I was already dead. The man in the suit smiled. "You came," he said, as if he had been expecting me. He offered me the nail. "Okay, this belongs to you." The bloated arm burst fully from the dirt, grasping wildly, searching for its missing skin, its missing face, its missing identity. Scraps on the ground crawled toward me, climbing onto my shoes, reaching my ankles, clinging with sticky warmth. My skin burned where they touched, its names written in tar smeared onto my legs. It appeared my name was one of them. The man leaned close and whispered, "They buried the wrong body 30 years ago, and all this time, you've been walking around in its place." Scrained, beneath me shook, splitting open, a corpse-shaped cavity yawning wide, waiting. The face whispered my name, not pleading now, but claiming. The crowd stepped forward as one, chanting without words, their mouths open in silent, hungry anticipation. The man in the suit pressed the nail into my hand. "It's time," he said gently. "Go home." The grave welcomed me. The earth hungered, and the face smiled. The chamber of growing faces. I first noticed it hidden beneath the old manor while cataloging the estate's archives. A narrow stairway, sealed with iron, descended into a shadow that felt almost alive. The air was thick with plaster dust and something faintly metallic, like dried blood. Every step made the shadows pulse around me, as if the walls were breathing. The first cast of a face leaned against the corner, mouth slightly open, eyes staring at nothing. Its expression twisted unnaturally, like it was mid-scream but silent. As I reached for a lamp, the light reflected off dozens of similar faces arranged along the walls. Each one seemed to swell subtly, closer than memory allowed. I touched one. Its plaster was smooth, warmer than expected, almost like skin that had been breathing while I climbed down. A whisper seemed to pass through the room, not from a mouth, but the walls themselves. My name, soft, hesitant, familiar. I stepped back, tripping over a pile of broken casts. They were younger faces, older faces, faces I swore I had seen before in fleeting dreams. One of the larger faces twitched as I passed. Shadows stretched from the corner and mimicked my every movement in perfect, warped precision. The room had no windows, yet a thin light seemed to seep from the walls themselves, illuminating faces I hadn't noticed until I blinked. I could hear a faint scraping sound behind me. It's like someone or something was using fingernails to polish the plaster of a new face. One cast fell from the wall without warning. It rolled slowly toward me, eyes wide, mouth opening into a scream I could feel in my chest. The whispers multiplied. I realized they were speaking fragments of my own memories, moments I hadn't shared with anyone, twisted into questions and accusations. I tried to run, but the stairway seemed longer than I remembered. Each step echoed, and faces along the walls stretched upward as if to block my exit. I noticed a new face forming in the far corner, the plaster bubbling as if alive, the features unmistakably resembling mine. The air grew warmer, smelling faintly of flesh and wet clay. Each breath felt heavy, as though the room was drawing life from me. I pressed my hands against the walls. The plaster gave slightly, like soft skin, then resisted, pulling my fingers in small, unnerving tugs. The whispers became a chorus, repeating my fears aloud. "You will stay. You will stay. You will." The repetition made my head ache, my own voice joining the chant. I saw a face emerge from the floor, slowly tilting toward me, eyes blinking in patterns that shouldn't exist. Each blink synchronized with mine. A shadow moved independently across the ceiling, stretching toward me in impossible angles, splitting like smoke, curling into shapes that resembled dozens of faces. I stumbled into a corner, bumping against a wall of casts. They were all gazing at me, swelling, growing larger, and whispering secrets I didn't want to know. One face leaned forward, the plaster cracking slightly. I could see tiny teeth forming in its mouth, gnashing softly as if tasting the air. The light dimmed suddenly. In the darkness, I felt dozens of gazes' eyes forming from shadow, staring into my very thoughts. I tried to scream, but the echoes returned not as my voice, but as whispered syllables spelling my deepest shame. The floor shifted beneath me, a subtle ripple, and I realized the chamber itself had begun to pulse, breathing in time with me. A new face pressed against the wall closest to me. It had my exact expression of fear, frozen mid-step, frozen mid-scream. I could feel a gentle pull on my hands again. The walls weren't solid, they wanted me, drawing me closer, as though to join the growing collection. The faces began to subtly merge, features stretching and rearranging into unfamiliar, Dalmatian, impossible geometries, yet somehow eerily human. I stumbled back and collided with a stack of plaster heads, tilting upward, whispering my thoughts before I even formed them. I realized the chamber had recorded me since my first step, mimicking every fear, every hesitation, growing a version of me to replace me entirely. I ran toward the stairway. The faces reached, cracked, and extended like fingers. One grazed my shoulder, leaving a chill that sank into my bones. I barely made it out of the stairwell, gasping. A manor above felt like a sanctuary, but I could still hear faint whispers drifting from below, repeating my name. At home, I tried to forget, but each mirror reflected subtle distortions, a widening of my grin, a flicker of my eyes moving on their own. And sometimes, in my sleep, I feel the plaster cold against my skin, the chamber growing, waiting for me to return. The Orphan Eater of Kestridge Workhouse. I returned to Kestridge only because the state archives emailed me about a familial inquiry. It's a kind of message you delete unless something inside you is already afraid of the truth. The town was smaller than I remembered, drained of color, its streets cracked like old skin. The hay in the air carried a faint sweetness that reminded me of spoiled milk. My childhood foster home sat on a hill overlooking the abandoned workhouse, a long brick building shaped like a coffin laid on its side. Every window darkened by time and soot. No one spoke of the workhouse when I was growing up, except in fragments. Coughing children, locked infirmary doors, and a cellar where sick kids were taken and never returned. The building's gates lay twisted on the ground. Tina and Ivy climbed the bricks like veins, trying to pull the structure back into the earth where it belonged. Inside the foyer, the temperature dropped sharply, and the floor smelled like dirt soaked with old breath, the kind that had been exhaled by people who died afraid. Its hallways stretched in unnatural angles, bending slightly downhill as if the whole building was sinking into something below that kept pulling with slow patience. The walls were lined with rusted hooks where coats once hung, but now they held small shoes, each pair arranged neatly, as if still waiting for children who would never come back. One shoe had a name stitched inside it, my own last name. The one I abandoned when I was 12, sewn in crooked letters by a hand too young to be steady. Fear curled low in my stomach, not because I thought a ghost lingered here, but because some part of me recognized I wasn't just visiting a ruin, I was returning to an obligation. Deeper inside, the air vibrated faintly, a low thrumming like a heartbeat coming from the stone foundation, steady and hungry. Rotting paperwork lay scattered on the floor, brittle pages listing children marked unfit, infirm, or simply removed, all written in the same hurried handwriting. A ledger sat open on a desk, showing a page dated the year I was born, with my name added at the bottom in smudged ink, followed by a single word: delayed. A cold draft slithered past me, carrying the smell of wet earth, and I realized it came from the cellar stairs, where darkness pooled like an open mouth. Each step downward groaned under my weight, protesting like old bones. And at the bottom, the ceiling lowered so much I had to walk bent forward, as if bowing, The tunnel widened into a chamber lit only by cracks in the ceiling where slivers of evening light fell across dirt floors. It's padded with cloth that looked disturbingly like old hospital gowns. Something moved in the corner, a slow shift, like skin dragging across soil land. The shape straightened until it scraped the beams above, towering and gaunt. Its limbs were too long, wrapped in remnants of children's clothing stretched to tearing, and its head lolled forward as though the neck had forgotten how to hold it upright. When it inhaled, the air around me trembled, drawn into its chest with the wet rasp of someone starving, not for food but for something more primal. The creature stepped into the light, and its face was carved with shallow grooves, each groove bearing a name etched in meticulous lines. As if someone used a bone needle to record them, I recognized some of the names kids from my foster home who vanished without explanation, always blamed on runaway fantasies or juvenile transfers no one bothered to question. The grooves didn't scar. They pulsed faintly, each name glowing like a vein under skin, living and reacting as though the children were still trapped inside, to reach toward me with fingers warped by growth that never should have happened. Knuckles sharp as stones, and whispered, "Bloodline returns to settle the debt." The voice wasn't a single tone but a layered chorus of children speaking in overlapping breaths. All pleading, all hungry, all knowing me. I staggered back, but its arm extended impossibly, stretching like chewed taffy. Fingers brushing my cheek with a cold dampness that carried the stench of basement mildew and despair. A sudden tremor shook the floor as the creature bent low, lowering its head until its mouth hovered inches from the dirt, where a second mouth opened beneath the soil. The ground split like a lip tearing open, revealing rows of teeth made of broken bones arranged into a gaping maw that breathed heat and wrought upward. The creature knelt reverently beside the hole, as though presenting me to the thing underneath, and the names on its face glowed brighter with urgent hunger. Ka. My own last name flickered on its cheek, freshly etched, still red around the edges as though it had been carved minutes before I arrived. The maw in the earth exhaled sharply, blowing dust across my eyes, and whispered in a voice too deep for anything human. The caretaker's line must feed what it birthed. Realization clicked painfully. My ancestor wasn't just a worker here. He created whatever lived below by sacrificing the dying children, feeding their bodies to the hollow under the building. The creature lunged, and I threw myself sideways, scrambling up the stairs while its arms stretched past the doorway, scraping the walls with fingers that left dark, wet streaks. The whole building groaned, shifting as though the foundation was rising, pushing upward with something massive crawling beneath it to reclaim me. I burst into the night, but the ground behind me shuddered with every pulse of the hollow's breath, and in the distance I heard the chorus whisper my last name again and again. I don't stay in one place for long anymore. Walls feel too thin, and floors feel too alive, and sometimes when I close my eyes I hear dirt shifting beneath my bed. Soon, I think, the debt will be collected, because the hunger under Kestridge never forgets the children it was promised, and I'm the last descendant left to repay it.